What?
That's my brother.
Oh, really?
That's my dad.
That's my brother.
All right.
That's my dad.
That's my dad.
Elijah,
Thank you for being quiet. Kellen, we are recording for those people who are gone. Today's objective is to learn the trick or the steps that you would need to subtract integers, and we can apply this to rational numbers. Remember what rational numbers are, Kellen?
Yeah.
What are rational numbers?
Fractions.
Oh, good. Yes, fractions and or.
Oh, I was about to say you're killing me. Put this thing down.
Oh, the poster used to be right there, but I moved it over here.
Oh,
I have big plans for that area right there.
That's how I was on
Yeah. I know, I'm gonna be going, oh, wait a second, it's over here. So, again, rational numbers are just fractions and decimals, and it's the evolution of numbers. They get more and more complicated. As we progress through the second half of topic A, you're gonna be working with fractions, adding, subtracting, and decimals, adding, subtracting, which hopefully you remember how to do. Now, remember our story with Pawzies versus Neggies. It's an age-old conflict that goes back many, 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 many years, beyond my age, and even my age and Mr. Berkey's age put together. We talked about getting along today to show that we could have unity, to show that we could get together and not, and then they mess around and they fight. So here's the deal. It's in their blood. They want to battle. Now, we're going to add a rule to today's things that we can only battle in certain situations, okay? So this is the truth. This is what we saw before. Remember this? All Pawzies and Neggies are created equal. And what that means is if I had, say, one Pawzie, one Neggie, or two Pawzies, two Neggies, or three Pawzies, three Neggies, or even four Pawzies, four Neggies, and it goes on, what is that equal to? Zero. They cancel each other out, right? Now, situation number one started with an M. What was that situation?
Monopoly.
Yes, Evan.
Majority.
Majority situation. Very good. And if you did well on the assessment last Friday, which I think most everybody did, it was a mid-90s average. Majority situation. This was question number 16. Very simple. They know if they had the majority or most in a battle, they would win by however many more they had compared to the other side. Right? So here's some examples. And we have our little puppets, but I've now animated them. All right. What is the left side equal to? 4 Pawzies. What is the right side?
7.
7 Neggies, right? So who has more?
Neggies.
The Neggies by how much?
3. 3.
And again, we could go through and look about that created equal. 1 Pawzie, 1 Neggie. Cancel each other out. And who has more? The Neggies by 3. Okay? That would work also if the Pawzies had the majority. What was the second situation? And who said that, Aaron, nice and loud? You said that, Aaron? No, that was you, Ava? Combine and make more. Good. Combine and make more. Thank you, Ava. And the combine and make more situation is very simple, and that's a good situation. We have Pawzies plus Pawzies. That's more Pawzies. That's what you've been dealing with all your life. What's new, what's different is Neggies plus Neggies equal more Neggies. And again, we can tie this to having money, or not having money in this case. If I owed somebody how much money?
5 Neggies.
$5, right? Or if I had 5 Neggies, and then I owed them how many more?
9.
8.
3.
8, right?
8.
Does anything cancel out? No, I become even more in debt. And what would my total debt be in this case?
$13.
$13. Or if I had 5 Neggies and 8 Neggies, that equals a negative 13. Okay? Is this really easy?
Yeah.
It's not that bad. Okay? You got to remember the first two situations. And then the last one, it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't occur very often. Aaron, do you remember it? You bet. The make zero situation, very good. And this occurs once in a while. It has to, or only occurs when they have the exact same number of Pawzies and Neggies, right?
Exact same time.
So I have 4 Pawzies, 4 Neggies, and what happens to them? They all cancel out and they make 0. You like that animation? It took me years to figure that out. Yes, Carter.
Every time you make an adjustment, the screen
It wavers a little bit. I thought I noticed that. You see that?
Yeah.
Over on the left? Yeah. Right. I don't know why. Have you ever noticed that before?
No.
I haven't either.
I have.
Thanks for pointing it out. All right. Now, here is another truth. Our first truth was all Pawzies and Neggies are created equal. This is something they also follow all the time. They cannot go against this rule, and they know it from an early age that no matter what, you never, ever, ever battle when you are subtracting, okay? Which means we can only battle when we are adding, all right? Does that make sense? So they learned a phrase. Instead of subtracting, we can add the opposite, okay? The phrase again, instead of subtracting, you can add the opposite. What is that similar to that we learned before, Anna?
That's not, never mind, I can't remember the word.
Instead of dividing, multiply by the reciprocal, okay? So we switched those out, and they are very similar. That's why I like the other phrase, instead of skip, flip, multiply. Instead of keep, change, flip, I like instead of dividing, we can multiply by the reciprocal. Likewise, instead of subtracting, this is what you're going to do every single time. We're going to add the opposite. Now, it requires a little more work because I will require you to physically change. When I give you a paper, pencil, worksheet, you must physically, that means with your pencil or pen, physically change every subtraction problem so that instead of the subtracting, you're going to add the opposite. Now remember what opposites are. What's the opposite of 7? Negative 7. What's the opposite of a negative 8?
8.
Positive 8, right? Another 2-word phrase for opposite is, does anybody remember?
Neggies.
Nope. Chaz?
Smiley Neggies.
Nope.
Alright.
We've discussed it briefly, and we're going to discuss it more in lesson 5 today. It's 2 words, and it's A and then I. Annabelle? Nope, that's an A and a V. I will call it the, let me think about it, additive identity. Okay?
This is not NFL Indian.
Nope, inverse. Additive inverse. Yeah, you're right. I got screwed up in my mind. Okay, so today we're going to look at the additive inverse, right, which ties to the additive identity, but it's slightly different. All right, so here's the deal. You never have to subtract again. Every problem you have, if it's subtracting, it becomes adding. We just took an assessment over adding, and most people did very well. So we're turning every single problem into what we just did. So should we do pretty well on this?
Yeah.
Yes.
sir.
So now, examples, okay? When you do this, you will see this, and we'll make common mistakes early on. When you become seniors, juniors, sophomores, hopefully you don't make this mistake, and you won't have to physically change everything. But right now, what I want you to do is instead of subtracting, what does the phrase tell me? Add. What's the opposite of a negative 3? A positive 3. So notice I did 8 subtract a negative 3 actually becomes 8 plus a positive 3. What's 8 plus 3?
11.
5.
11.
Oh, wait.
What?
I'm sorry.
8 plus 3. If you follow my rules, there's no like logical thinking because this stuff messes with your mind, I think. This stuff is kind of tough. When you look at it, your brain isn't going to jump to the answer yet. In time, you're going to physically change it in your head. But for right now, you got to physically change it on the paper. Yes, Miles?
So we don't change the first number, it's the second one.
Good point. Do I say to do anything with the first number? No. And remember when we did, instead of dividing, we multiplied by the reciprocal. Did we ever change the first number?
No.
Never. Okay? And that multiply by the reciprocal or add the opposite says we're doing that to the first number. We never change the first number. Great point. Hopefully everybody at home is picking that up too. Never change first number.
Yeah.
Next one, a negative 7, subtract 5. Now, in your brain, Miles, what number jumps out to you as the answer?
13.
2, negative 2, right? That's what we're used to seeing, but it's not, okay? What we must do is, instead of subtracting, notice I'm not changing this. Instead of subtracting, I'm going to add, what's the opposite of 5?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. So this becomes a negative 7 and a negative 5. When I have neggies and neggies become more neggies, and what is the answer, Leah? Negative 12, okay? Initially, when you look at these problems, your first answer probably is wrong because you didn't physically change it. This next one, this is like the most complicated type of problem. a -3 take away a -4,
7.
okay? He says 7, or maybe a -7, because that's what we're used to looking at. But here's the deal. Instead of subtracting, you must add, what's the opposite of -4?
4.
Positive 4, okay? So I have 3 neggies, 4 Pawzies, what's the answer? 1,
That
okay?
was correct.
Alright. So here's the deal, we have to pause our logic for now, because it doesn't make sense totally yet. I'm gonna show you how it makes sense with the chips, alright? Chips actually like the number line, the way the book does number lines, it's confusing and it's more steps. I like doing this. If you remember my phrase, instead of subtracting, add the opposite, you're gonna get to the answer immediately. Yes, Leah? Why do you have to do this? To get the answer?
Why do you
That's the process, okay?
Why do you need the answer?
Now, this one, Leah, you're probably smart enough. What's 7 take away 7? Oh, people miss this one too. What's 7 take away 7?
0.
0. We know it's 0. But here's the deal. Let's go through our logic. Instead of subtracting, I'm going to add. What's the opposite of 7?
-7.
-7. So I have 7 Pawzies, 7 Neggies. We know that's equal to
0.
0. Okay?
So.
So, Leah, this is the process you use to get to the answer when subtracting.
Why does it
Okay. Why does it work that way? That's a great question, because adding and subtracting work the way they work. And this is how you do it. Remember how you did long division?
Yes.
Remember how you did like big multiplication? Remember, there's a process. This is the process. Now, when we dealt with all positive numbers, it was super easy unless the first number was smaller than your second number, right? All right, we could do 14 take away 8. We could do 14 take away 6. Could we do 14 take away 20? That got confusing, okay? And here's the deal. It's like a 14 battling a -20. Who has more? Neggies by 6, okay? So we're turning it into something that makes sense. And when we're subtracting, we can change it every time. Instead of subtracting, what are we gonna do? Add. What's the opposite of a -2? Positive 2. Who has more, 9 Neggies or 2 Pawzies?
9 Neggies.
Neggies by
7.
7, okay? If you remember my process, it's not that tough. What do you think this answer is? He says 4. He says 4. Who agrees with 4? I'm glad most of you disagree, because that would be wrong. Here's the deal.
How?
Instead of subtracting, you need to add, what's the opposite of -6? Add 6, positive 6.
Oh, that's not a negative.
What's 10 plus 6?
16.
16.
Carter and Skylar agreed with me.
I know, they did the same thing. We can't make those mistakes on the assessment.
No, I
Okay.
tried to say that
So,
already. I thought
here's the
it was
deal.
10. I thought it was -10 and then -4.
Exactly, and you were wrong this time. Next time you're gonna get it right. So,
Yeah.
in summary,
Your answer backwards.
when you are doing subtraction, you must physically switch every single problem, okay? And when you get the worksheet in a little bit, every subtraction problem is going to change into a what problem? An adding problem. And the phrase is, instead of subtracting, you add the opposite. So that every problem is an addition problem. And again, is either a majority situation, or a combine and make more situation, or what was the last kind of situation? Make 0 situation. Every single problem will turn one into one of these. All the problems will be addition problems, just like what we did in lessons 1 through 4. That make sense?
Yes.
So your homework is going to be a subtracting integers worksheet, which I'm not going to give you just yet. Okay? Now we're going to go into lesson 5, and I believe it's page 52, but we'll look at that here in a sec.